Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India, India's voice to the world. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. Coming up in the next hour, Indian diaspora warmly welcomes Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India to Johannesburg ahead of the 15th BRICS summit. India's lunar mission Chandrayaan-3 closes in on a historic landing on the moon's south pole. Former US President Donald Trump plans to hand himself in over charges relating to his 2020 election loss in the state of Georgia. And Indian Grandmaster R. Pragyananda eyes a dream win in the Chess World Cup final. Now the latest on DD India's BRICS coverage. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has landed in South Africa's Johannesburg for the 15th BRICS summit. He was received by the Deputy President of South Africa, Paul Mashatile. It's the first in-person BRICS summit since 2019. The summit will provide an opportunity to review progress of initiatives launched by the group and identify future areas of activity. The Indian Prime Minister will take part in two other events, the BRICS Africa Outreach and BRICS Plus Dialogue, to be organized after the summit concludes. The BRICS Africa Outreach and BRICS Plus Dialogue will include countries invited specially by South Africa. Upon arrival, Prime Minister Modi received a ceremonial reception at the airport. Joining me is Leon Zesenyange from Johannesburg. Leon, what are South Africa's priorities as the host country, and what does it hope to achieve by the end of the summit?
Provide a stable workforce for companies in the future.
Well, I think it's very important to know when South Africa became a member of BRICS, and that's in 2010. So they've really moved a 13-year journey so far as a member of this bloc. And definitely its priorities therein, according to President Cyril Ramaphosa's address on Sunday. And even just now, he's actually speaking. He insists and emphasizes on the fact that there's quite a lot for South Africa to benefit from being part of this bloc. Being part of BRICS in itself has expanded South Africa's position and influence as an emerging global economy, an emerging economy. So herein, of course, are other things in terms of investment, trade, finance that South Africa could benefit. And at this point in time, definitely South Africa is trying to push and expand its stance as an emerging economy. So definitely there is quite a lot for it to benefit. But the outcomes here, unlike President Cyril Ramaphosa is just speaking now, says that he prefers to see not just South Africa benefiting from this, but the continent of Africa.
Do you think that the summit will come to a consensus on adding new members?
Compelling value proposition for companies?
Well, it's one of those decisions that are eagerly waited for here, and it's one that should be decided over the next 1 or 2 days. But importantly, though, is the process that leads up to the inclusion of member countries to this particular bloc. South Africa, Russia, and China are open to the expansion. India and Brazil have had a bit of skepticism and trying to hold back and saying, no, we should not be able to rush this particular process. We need to look at the criteria, the standards of inclusion of countries to this bloc. So that is where the lacuna only remains, but hopefully, and definitely hopefully, there could be a general consensus to the expansion and inclusion of other countries, and indeed the BRICS bloc is based on the consensus decision making. So those are the discussions that will be taking place, and we hope that over the next 1 or 2 days there could be a decision made.
Leon, thank you. Arthi Nanak Chand Shanand, the president of Arya Samaj South Africa, along with a member of the Indian diaspora, tied a Rakhi to Prime Minister Modi. The Rakhi is a wristband tied by a girl or woman on the wrist of a brother or one of who takes on the responsibilities of a brother, particularly during the Raksha Bandhan festival. Raksha is Hindi for safety and Bandhan means bond. Raksha Bandhan or Rakhi is a Hindu festival dedicated to brothers and sisters.
I was indeed humbled to have been given the privilege and the opportunity to tie the Rakhi on Modi ji's wrist. I think one of the things I'd like to mention is that I've always seen Modi ji as a magnanimous leader, not only at a religious level, but culturally, economically, politically, at any level. And I think from that point of view, it actually was my way of saying we are grateful for what you have contributed towards us.
A 3D model of the new Swami Narayan temple, which is likely to be completed by 2025 in Johannesburg, was showcased to Prime Minister Modi upon his arrival for the BRICS summit. And my colleague Shubhendu Ghosh now joins me live from Johannesburg. Shubhendu, it's been a few hours since the Indian Prime Minister landed in the city. What's been his itinerary like? I'm told the business forum is still on as we speak.
That's right, Ramesh. It's good evening from Johannesburg. There's a time difference of about 3.5 hours between New Delhi and Johannesburg. Prime Minister received an electrifying welcome first from the diaspora when he, local time, reached in the afternoon in Johannesburg. The diaspora was very, very enthusiastic to see their leader among them. Yes, right now the engagement with the business delegation is on. It is an important meeting. After all, BRICS is a congregation primarily of the emerging economies. So economic context takes the most significance. What are the ways in which BRICS nations could engage with one another in a better manner? BRICS companies could work with one another. The theme this year, South Africa's host, is BRICS and Africa. The ways in which sustainable investment development could be promoted in the Africa as a continent is also high on the agenda. And that's what is also being discussed in the business congregation, which is underway right now. It will be followed by a retreat, a sort of informal time for the leaders to meet and greet before more hectic talks take place tomorrow. Ramesh?
Shubhendu, since you mentioned the retreat, is a retreat going to be an informal affair, as you mentioned there where the leaders meet and greet each other, or do you think they would discuss weightier issues or matters?
That's an interesting question, Ramesh. The big issues to be tackled in this edition of BRICS, so the leaders would try to make best use of every opportunity they have. When I say informal, more in terms of away from the gaze of the media, the camera, the pressure of diplomacy. Over dinner, leaders could speak their heart out, and that I think could lead a more productive foundation for more negotiations to happen in the coming days. So in that sense, the retreat would be an important beginning towards what this edition of BRICS seeks to achieve.
And finally, looking ahead, what's planned for Wednesday?
Ahead, Ramesh, there are, of course, the closed-door deliberations, the big issues that we've been talking about, the expansion of the BRICS congregation, a new payment system, and there are other issues as well related to multilateral reforms and other issues that BRICS focuses on, including climate change. And thereafter, it is also going to be talking about the BRICS Plus congregation. There are not just BRICS leaders here, there are over 20 to 40 leaders from different developing countries, from Asia, from Africa, from Latin America, who've gathered here. So that congregation will see a significant section of the developing world coming together to talk about the way forward and the challenges and concerns and opportunity that lie in front of them. There's also an Africa outreach program where greater emphasis is going to be the manner in which the developing world will come together and engage deeply with Africa, which India, by the way, is doing already vis-a-vis the whole continent.
Shubhendu, thank you. And people from all walks of life came to meet and greet Prime Minister Modi. They said the moment was a dream come true.
It was so good. Like, I was very excited. I was almost into tears. Like, I was about to cry. It was like so. I got to handshake him.
We are very excited about the arrival. He is a role model of millions of people. We love him. He has taken India to the next level in the last 10 years.
It was the most wonderful experience, and the wonderful thing is that I was singled out by him. He recognized that I took the time out to come and see him, and he appreciated it. And that shows me his humility as a person. It shows me his love that he has for people, that he recognizes that you made the effort to see him.
It was a wonderful experience, and on behalf of the Pretoria Hindu Society, the Sri Pretoria Hindu Society, we welcome Modi ji. This is a great honor for us.
Cordially and respectfully extend my regards to every citizen of India, and I'm proud to be an Indian and would like to die with an Indian identity by serving the country in a very enforcement way or in a silent way.
And still to come on DD India News Hour. A deep dive into the BRICS summit as a group seeks to reinvent itself. And Indian Space Agency ISRO says Chandrayaan-3 mission is on schedule.
Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution.
This series is going to tell stories of such change makers.
Watch Change Makers on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. The BRICS will be expanded at the Johannesburg summit. The big announcement was made by South Africa's Sherpa Anil Suklal. He said that the BRICS leaders will be announcing the new members at the gathering. DD India's Amritpal Singh reports.
As the 15th leaders meeting of the BRICS summit kicks off here in Johannesburg, the grouping is focusing on developmental partnership with not just South Africa, which is the president this year and the host of this summit, but also by extension with the rest of the African continent. The other is reform of multilateral institutions and strengthening cooperation between the global south. To talk more about that, I have with me Dr. Anil Suklal. He's the Sherpa of South Africa for the BRICS Summit. Thank you, Dr. Suklal, for speaking to us. Over 40 leaders or heads of state and government of over 40 countries converge here in Johannesburg. Would there be the talk of expansion of BRICS? Do you think, does South Africa think the time for expansion of this grouping has come?
Well, expansion is definitely on the agenda. It is something that was already cited in the declaration of last year, where leaders asked us to start the discussion of expansion and to look at developing guiding principles, standards, criteria and procedure for expansion. South Africa has been seized with this matter. We've had several Sherpa meetings discussing expansion, and we have completed our documentation around this issue.
Would the grouping be admitting new members at this summit?
Most likely. Most likely.
Okay.
Leaders will make an announcement after the meeting.
Climate change is an issue which affects the world. Would that be prominently on the agenda?
Absolutely. It is prominently on the agenda. It's an issue that we are discussing, and the devastation that it has on all of our peoples, our economies, our livelihoods, and what is it we can do collectively as BRICS to address the issues of climate change, climate action, and also to ensure that the global North commits and fulfill its commitments in terms of climate financing, in assisting developing countries both with finance and technology to address issues of both mitigation and adaptation.
What will be main on the agenda of the 15th BRICS Summit?
In terms of the substance, of course, you've mentioned a very important point, the reform of the multilateral institutions. This is a standing item of BRICS leaders' agenda. As you know, the current multilateral global order is archaic, outdated, and almost dysfunctional, including the Security Council that's almost paralyzed and cannot address issues of global peace and security effectively. Since its outset, BRICS has been calling for a reform of global governance architecture.
DD India correspondent Shubhendu Ghosh has more about the issues set to dominate the summit agenda. Take a listen.
Let's talk about 5 key issues in focus at the 15th BRICS Summit. First, expansion of the BRICS. There is greater likelihood of BRICS inviting in new members to its fold soon. All BRICS leaders are on the same page as far as expansion of this influential grouping is concerned. Second, developing common payment system. Prioritizing trade in local currency and devising a common payment system is high on the agenda. It will help developing countries tackle the hegemony of dollar and euro better. Number 3, reformed multilateralism. Economic strategies must be implemented with the vision of placing BRICS economies at the center of sustainable global economic growth. It will require real reform of global governance institutions. Number 4, climate change and sustainable development goals. Climate crisis need urgent interventions from the perspective of the global south. Financing, supply chains will have to be reimagined. It will determine the ability of these nations to achieve the sustainable development goals. Number 5, closer engagement with Africa. The theme this year at the BRICS Summit calls for closer cooperation between BRICS and Africa. India is already a principal development partner in the region. So those are the 5 issues to look out for at the 15th BRICS Summit. With Team DD India, Shubhendu Ghosh in Johannesburg.
And returning to our top story, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's arrival in Johannesburg for the 15th BRICS Summit. Time to bring in our next guests for a discussion on this gathering. And joining me are Mr. Rajiv Bhatia and Professor Harshvardhan Pant. Mr. Bhatia is a former Indian High Commissioner to South Africa, Kenya, Ambassador to Myanmar and Mexico as well. And Professor Pant is Vice President Studies and Foreign Policy at Observer Research Foundation. The ORF is a privately held think tank headquartered in New Delhi. Ambassador Bhatia, if I can start with you, there's a lot of buzz about expansion of the BRICS. 40 countries are interested in becoming its member, out of which 23 odd countries have formally applied for membership. Will the BRICS forge a consensus on this issue before the summit ends? Also, do you think there is a broad agreement on the principles or criteria for admitting new members?
Yes, thank you very much. Greetings from Gateway House, my present think tank. I think there is fairly convincing evidence which indicates that consensus is about to be reached on the criteria and the guidelines. As we had anticipated earlier, there is also a good likelihood of the summit announcing the first list of countries that might make the cut. We have to keep in mind 2 or 3 things here. There have been divergent views, so it is important to bring everybody together, the 5 countries. There was this preference for big bang expansion, all suddenly to be done and achieved, and the other view that it should be done gradually and keeping in mind the interests of the BRICS organization as such. So I feel that there is now firm indication because clearly China, South Africa, President Lula, and probably to some extent Russia are very keen that this is the appropriate time for expansion. Others will be quite willing to support this for the sake of solidarity, but we have to watch the list that may be announced a little later.
Fair enough. Professor Pant, India says it has an open mind on the issue of expansion, but Brazil has some reservations, we are told. On the other hand, Russia and China are pushing for an expansion. The question that is agitating many a mind as we speak is this: will BRICS grow too big too quickly, become unwieldy?
Well, you know, Ramesh, we'll have to wait and watch and see what happens, because personally, I'm not convinced that expansion is going to do anything for BRICS. But certainly that seems to be the consensus, as we are told. And I think what is also interesting in some ways is this morphing of BRICS from a purely geo-economic platform to a more of an overtly geopolitical platform that one has to watch out for, because that is not something in India's interest.
Okay.
And so how India navigates...
Why do you say that, Professor Pant, if I can jump in there? Why do you say that?
Because I think the whole logic of BRICS and the whole logic of India being part of this amalgamation of countries that share very little in common, apart from the fact that they were at one point at least seen as emerging economic powers that were demanding more of an economic voice in global governance. So I think when you talk of multilateral institutions, multilateral economic institutions in particular, the idea was that these group of countries would be represented more fairly and equitably, and that their voices will be heard, that they can demand a greater pie in global governance. And before that agenda has been achieved, we are now being told that, look, more countries need to be brought in. Maybe that's a good strategy for putting in more pressure. But I think the challenge would be that, again, on what terms and conditions these new members are being brought in, and what does that mean for, as you have pointed out, what does it mean for intra-BRICS cohesion? Because after all, with these, more facetiously, with the entry of some of these new countries, BRICS won't be BRICS by definition. It will have to morph into something more, BRICS plus. So I think a lot of these issues are also about intra-BRICS cohesion and what would happen to that as new members enter. So unless we know exactly what is the criteria, what are the parameters, what is the, what kind of standards are being set for the entry of those countries, I think we need to be a bit wary of the entire process.
All right, Ambassador Bhatia, moving on from the issue of expansion of the BRICS, as the voice of the global South, what do you think India would focus on at this year's summit? Can one, for instance, expect progress on an alternative currency or local currencies?
India takes its role as the voice or a leader of the global South quite seriously, but also realistically.
Okay.
India is fully aware that this is not the only leader of the global South. I think in one way or the other, all the five BRICS members are the leaders and voices of the global south. I think that is something we have to recognize. And therefore, if we speak in the same voice together, then the global south's interests can be served better. Now, this summit is taking place with a focus on cooperation between BRICS and Africa. And this is a surer ground for India. I think India is very clear that there has to be more funding for development, economic development in Africa. There has to be more funding delivered for climate finance in Africa. There has to be also greater facilitation for the free trade area that Africa is trying to establish. And above all, let us not forget, India has been at the forefront in advocating the idea that the African Union should secure permanent membership of G20. So this would be a good place, Johannesburg, for our delegation to push all these goals. And I'm sure they are very much doing it already. And the efforts will be reflected in the Johannesburg Declaration in a day or two.
I'm afraid I've run out of time, so I'll have to leave it at that. May I thank both my guests, Ambassador Bharti and Professor Pant, for joining us and sharing your thoughts with our viewers at home and abroad. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. All right, let's take a look now at some other stories making news in India. India and the Philippines have signed a memorandum of understanding to enhance bilateral maritime cooperation. The MOU was signed by Indian Coast Guard Director General Rakesh Pal and Admiral Artemio M. Abu, Commandant of the Philippines Coast Guard. India's top court has announced an expert panel to study the population size of Himalayan towns. The experts are set to study the hill stations in Indian states such as Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh. The court's decision comes among environmental and ecological concerns with reports of floods and landslides triggered by excessive rains in the area. Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates has called India a leader in digital public infrastructure, applauding the country's digital banking initiatives, sharing a picture of an Indian woman named Kusuma who works as a branch postmaster at India Post Payments Bank in the southern Indian city of Bengaluru. Gates praised her remarkable contribution to the financial empowerment of her community. The India Post Payments Bank offers digital banking services including cash withdrawals, deposits, remittances and utility payments to 70 million people and growing. Still to come on DD India News Hour. Chandrayaan 3 prepares to land on the moon on Wednesday. Former US President Donald Trump says he will surrender on Thursday.
Namaste land.
Marhaban ila al-Hind.
Zari India.
Salam India. Namaste India.
Namaskar Bharata.
Muy
India.
Nahnu hunud. India. Ma Hindi hasti. Hindian.
Salam Hindustan. We are India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. A quick recap of the headlines. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Johannesburg, South Africa for the 15th BRICS Summit. India's lunar mission Chandrayaan 3 closes in on a historic landing on the moon's south pole. And former US President Donald Trump plans to surrender on Thursday after being charged with seeking to overturn his 2020 election loss in the state of Georgia. Former U.S. President Donald Trump plans to surrender to Fulton County authorities on Thursday in response to charges relating to the 2020 election. Trump has agreed to a $200,000 bond and other release conditions after his lawyers met with the region's district attorney's office. Trump has been accused of being the head of a quote-unquote criminal enterprise that was part of a broad criminal conspiracy to overturn his election defeat. Trump now faces 91 charges across 4 separate criminal cases at the same time as he runs for president in 2024. He denies any wrongdoing and slams the cases as politically motivated. And for the latest, DD India correspondent Tony Waterman joins me live from Austin, Texas. Tony, will Trump surrender in Georgia and soon walk out on bail?
Yeah, that's exactly what we expect to happen. As you mentioned, he's agreed to this $200,000 bail. He's not going to put all of that money forward, just 10% of that, but with the money in hand, he will be able to walk out of the Fulton County Jail after he's been arrested and booked. And this is going to be the first time that the former president has posted bail. He hasn't done that in the 3 other criminal cases that he's contending with at the moment. We could also see the first Trump mugshot being taken. This is something that normally happens for any other alleged criminal, but Trump has avoided it in these past 3 cases. Officials instead using these existing photos of the former president, but the Fulton County Sheriff is saying that he is going to treat the former president just like any other alleged criminal. But of course, that is not the case. We are talking about the former president of the United States, the current frontrunner for the Republican nominee for 2024 presidential election, and he is now being arrested for an unprecedented 4th time, and in this case for his alleged efforts at trying to overturn the election results in the state of Georgia. He is facing 13 charges in this particular case. That includes racketeering, criminal conspiracy, and criminal solicitation, and if he is ultimately found guilty of these charges, he could be spending decades behind bars.
Now, Tony, how is the state of Georgia preparing for the surrender?
Well, there is a heightened security presence that's already been put in place. There are barriers that are going up around the jail, and officials have already said that they are going to implement a full lockdown in and around the facility on Thursday. And if any of the other arrests that we have seen in D.C. and New York and Florida are anything to go by, there is going to be, and there has been, this enormous media presence on the ground. There could also be protesters or demonstrators both in favor of the former president and also critics of the former president. And don't forget that Trump is just one of 19 co-defendants. All of those other individuals have also been given this noon Friday deadline to turn themselves in. And in fact, just today, 2 of them have already done so, including John Eastman, who is the former personal lawyer to Donald Trump and is really seen as sort of this architect of this theory that the former vice president, Mike Pence, could have overturned the outcome of these elections by not certifying the Electoral College votes.
And finally, in the presidential election campaign, will Trump's legal troubles be a talking point for both sides to whip up sympathy by one side and to point fingers by another?
Certainly, and this is something that we are already seeing. Trump has been out on the campaign trail denying these allegations, calling these cases witch hunts, and saying that they are intended to derail his presidential campaign. And that message seems to be getting across to some voters, his very core base at least, because every single poll that is out there shows that Trump has this substantial double-digit lead over his closest rivals. And in fact, some of those rivals have rallied to his defense, are incorporating the same type of language that Donald Trump himself had been using, saying that this is a weaponization of the justice system here in the United States. On Biden's side, the president has not directly addressed these now 4 arrests and charges against the former president, but Democrats have certainly pointed to these as a reason why Donald Trump, in their view, is not fit to be president of the United States again.
All right, thank you, Tony. Tony Waterman reporting there from Austin in Texas. Indian origin leader Tharman Shanmugaratnam has been officially declared as one of 3 candidates for the 1st September presidential election in Singapore. The president has a largely ceremonial role in that country. A former Deputy Prime Minister, Shanmugaratnam, is considered as the candidate of the ruling People's Action Party, which has been in power since 1959. The other 2 candidates are Ngang Kok Song and Tan Kin Lian. Both are former business executives. More than 2.7 million citizens will vote on the 1st of September. Singapore's president has a 6-year term. Incumbent President Halima Yacob's tenure ends on 13th September. And all eyes on India's moon mission as Chandrayaan-3 is scheduled to land on the moon's south pole on Wednesday. Chandrayaan-3 is at its final moments of preparation to land. Indian Space Agency ISRO will broadcast the landing event live from around 5:20 p.m. IST on 23rd August. Russia's Luna 25 spacecraft crashed this weekend. It was also on its way to the moon. Now, this means that Chandrayaan-3 could become the first to land on the moon's dark side. This is India's 3rd lunar mission. India says it aims to study the moon's geology, water resources, and potential for future human exploration. As India gears up to cheer on Chandrayaan-3, the Nehru Planetarium in New Delhi has displayed models of the lander and rover, which are expected to land on the lunar surface. DD India's Dibyendu Mondal spoke to Principal Scientist Ritu Nath, who explained how it all works.
India is on its way to make history. We are just hours away from landing on the moon's south pole, a feat which only 3 other nations have achieved so far. We are here at the Nehru Planetarium in New Delhi, where the several models which have been used in the Chandrayaan-3 mission has been displayed here, and I'm joined by Principal Scientist Mr. Ritu Nath to explain us what these modules are about and what the Chandrayaan-3 looks like when it will be landing on the moon's south pole expectedly by tomorrow evening.
Right. All eyes are now on the lander. There's a Vikram lander. You can see this model is a Vikram lander. So tomorrow at around 5:45, that lander will start descending for a soft landing on the lunar surface, and this entire process will take about 18 to 19 minutes. And this entire sequence is divided into 4 phases. First phase is called hard braking phase. Hard braking phase, that lander will actually descend from about 30 kilometer to 7.42 kilometer from the lunar surface. While it is traveling this much vertically, it is actually going horizontally 730 kilometer around. The second phase is called altitude holding. It is about 10 seconds. And this 10 seconds, this vertical height will reduce from 7.4 to 6.8 kilometer. The third stage will be the smooth braking phase, which is about 3 minutes 20 seconds. This end of the smooth braking, it will be only at a height of 1.1 kilometer around. Then it will actually vertically descend. Exactly, it will vertically descend from 1100 meter. That time its speed will be, vertical speed will be about 2 meter per second, around 3.2 to 3 or maybe less than 2 even. That depends on the data at that time.
This is the Vikram lander, and this is the rover. What will be the job of the rover when it lands on the moon's surface? I understand that this is the vehicle that will make the soft landing, and after landing the rover will move out of the lander. So if you could explain us what role will this rover exactly play when it lands on the moon's surface?
See, the Vikram is the lander. That's the main part now. It is had because it has 5 payloads. One of the payload is the rover itself. Okay, the rover is inside the Vikram lander, and the Vikram lander is also having 4 scientific instruments. once the final touchdown happens, soft landing, after that only rover will come out. So final touchdown, the moment it touches down, the first mission objective is achieved. That is the soft landing on lunar surface. After that, the rover will come down and it touches the lunar surface and it starts moving. The second mission objective is fulfilled. That is the rover moving on lunar surface. Now the third mission objective is in situ scientific experiments. In situ mean on ground, on site. So it has 6 sensors. 2 sensors are on the rover, 4 sensors are on the lander. Total 6 sensors. It will do various experiments.
What this 20 minutes of terror is, and how taking lessons from Chandrayaan 2 when we could not successfully land on the moon's south pole. So what have we learned, and what is this 20 minutes of terror?
Rather than terror, I would rather like to say this is an opportunity to learn from the mistake. When the Chandrayaan 2 could not land softly, but the data which we received during the descent phase was used to actually modify the lander. There is no terror as such. Only we can say this 18 or 19 minutes is a stage of descent with all likelihood that it will be able to land softly on the lunar surface.
Well, not only India, I think the whole world is holding its breath to see that this time the Chandrayaan 3 mission lands on the south pole of the moon and make India the only 4th nation in the world to land on the lunar surface. In fact, on the south pole of the moon's lunar surface. With camera person Ajay Chopra, this is Dibyendu Mondal for DD India.
Indian Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan has condemned the statement by Karnataka Deputy Chief Minister on scrapping the national education policy as politically motivated. Minister Pradhan said the policy is a 21st century document for the future and not a political document.
Deputy Chief Minister of Karnataka, my dear friend Shiva Kumarji, had made an announcement. They will scrap national education policy. I want to tell my dear friend Shiv Kumarji, your facts are wrong. Your statement is mischievous. Your statement is regressive. It's not looking towards future. National education policy is not implemented from 2021, it is implemented from 2020. This is a visionary philosophical document envisioned by educationists of this country. This is not a political document. This is a philosophical document for 21st century.
A G20 trade and investment working group is preparing to meet in India's northern city of Jaipur, Rajasthan. Famously known as the Pink City, Jaipur will host the meeting from 24th to the 25th of this month. Now, more than 300 delegates will take part in the meeting.
Behind me is the excellence of Rajput architecture, the world-famous Amer Fort. Before Jaipur was established by Savai Jai Singh in 1727, this Amer was the capital of Kachawa dynasty. During the G20 summit in Jaipur, the delegates would get to see the excellence of Rajput culture and history here at the Amer Fort. They would be also hosted at a dinner at City Palace, which is
Prime Minister Modi of India is speaking in Johannesburg, South Africa. Let's listen in.
लीडर्स, आप सबको नमस्कार। मुझे खुशी है कि दक्षिण अफ्रीका की भूमि पर रखते ही हमारे कार्यक्रम की शुरुआत ब्रिक्स बिजनेस फोरम से हो रही है। सबसे पहले मैं राष्ट्रपति रामाफोसा को उनके निमंत्रण और इस बैठक के आयोजन के लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देता हूं। ब्रिक्स बिजनेस काउंसिल को 10वीं वर्षगांठ पर बहुत बहुत बधाई और शुभकामनाएं देता हूं। पिछले 10 वर्षों में ब्रिक्स बिजनेस काउंसिल ने हमारे आर्थिक सहयोग को बढ़ाने में बहुत महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका निभाई है। 2009 में जब ब्रिक्स की पहली समिट आयोजित की गई थी, तब विश्व एक बड़े आर्थिक संकट से बाहर आ रहा था। उस समय ब्रिक्स वैश्विक अर्थव्यवस्था के लिए एक आशा की किरण के रूप में उभरा था। वर्तमान समय में भी कोविड महामारी, तनावों और विवादों के बीच विश्व आर्थिक चुनौतियों से जूझ रहा है। ऐसे समय में ब्रिक्स देशों के एक बार फिर महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका है। फ्रेंड्स, वैश्विक अर्थव्यवस्था में उथल-पुथल के बावजूद भारत आज विश्व की फास्टेस्ट ग्रोइंग मेजर इकोनॉमी है। जल्द ही भारत $5 ट्रिलियन इकोनॉमी बन जाएगा। इस बात में कोई संदेह नहीं कि आने वाले वर्षों में भारत विश्व का ग्रोथ इंजन होगा। यह इसलिए है क्योंकि भारत ने आपदा और मुश्किलों के समय को आर्थिक सुधार के अवसर में परिवर्तित किया। पिछले कुछ वर्षों में हमने मिशन मोड में जो रिफॉर्म्स किए हैं, उनसे भारत में ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस में लगातार बढ़ोतरी हुई है। हमने कंप्लायंस बर्डन को कम किया है, रेड टेप को हटाकर रेड कारपेट बिछा रहे हैं। जीएसटी और इंसॉल्वेंसी एंड बैंक्रप्सी कोड के लागू होने से इन्वेस्टर कॉन्फिडेंस बढ़ा है। रक्षा और अंतरिक्ष जैसे क्षेत्र जिनको प्रतिबंधित माना जाता था, आज प्राइवेट सेक्टर के लिए खोल दिए गए हैं। हमने पब्लिक सर्विस डिलीवरी और गुड गवर्नेंस पर विशेष रूप से ध्यान केंद्रित किया है। टेक्नोलॉजी के इस्तेमाल से भारत ने फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन की और एक बड़ी छलांग लगाई है। इसका सबसे अधिक लाभ हमारी ग्रामीण महिलाओं को मिला है। आज एक क्लिक से भारत में करोड़ों लोगों को डायरेक्ट बेनिफिट ट्रांसफर किए जाते हैं। अब तक $360 बिलियन से भी अधिक ऐसे ट्रांसफर किए जा चुके हैं। इससे सर्विस डिलीवरी में पारदर्शिता बढ़ी है और भ्रष्टाचार और मिडलमैन कम हुए हैं। प्रति गीगाबाइट डाटा की कीमत में भारत सबसे किफायती देशों में है। आज भारत में स्ट्रीट वेंडर से लेकर बड़े बड़े शॉपिंग मॉल तक यूपीआई यानी यूनिफाइड पेमेंट इंटरफेस का इस्तेमाल किया जाता है। आज विश्व के सबसे अधिक डिजिटल ट्रांजैक्शन वाला देश भारत है। यूएई, फ्रांस, सिंगापुर जैसे देश इस प्लेटफॉर्म के साथ जुड़े हैं। ब्रिक्स देशों के साथ भी इस पर काम करने के लिए अनेक संभावनाएं हैं। भारत के इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में बड़े पैमाने पर हो रहे निवेश से देश का परिदृश्य बदल रहा है। इस वर्ष के बजट में हमने इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के लिए लगभग $120 बिलियन का प्रावधान रखा है। इस निवेश के माध्यम से हम भविष्य के एक नए भारत की मजबूत नींव रख रहे हैं। रेल, रोड, वाटरवे, एयरवेज हर क्षेत्र में तेज गति से बदलाव आ रहा है। आज भारत में 10,000 किलोमीटर प्रति वर्ष की रफ्तार से नए हाईवे बन रहे हैं। पिछले 9 वर्ष में एयरपोर्ट की संख्या दोगुनी हुई है। निवेश और उत्पादन को बढ़ाने के लिए हमने प्रोडक्शन लिंक इंसेंटिव स्कीम्स लागू की हैं। लॉजिस्टिक्स कॉस्ट कम होने से भारत का मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर कॉम्पिटिटिव हो रहा है। रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी के क्षेत्र में भारत वर्ल्ड लीडर में से एक है। हम भारत को सोलर एनर्जी, विंड एनर्जी, इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स, ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन, ग्रीन एमोनिया जैसे क्षेत्रों में ग्लोबल मैन्युफैक्चरिंग हब बनाने के लिए सक्रिय रूप से कदम उठा रहे हैं। स्वाभाविक है कि इससे भारत में रिन्यूएबल टेक्नोलॉजी का एक बड़ा मार्केट बनेगा। आज भारत में विश्व का तीसरा सबसे बड़ा स्टार्टअप इकोसिस्टम है। भारत में इस समय 100 से भी अधिक यूनिकॉर्न है। आईटी, टेलीकॉम, फिनटेक, एआई और सेमीकंडक्टर्स जैसे क्षेत्रों में हम मेक इन इंडिया, मेक फॉर द वर्ल्ड के विजन को आगे बढ़ा रहे हैं। इन सभी प्रयासों का सामान्य जन के जीवन पर प्रत्यक्ष रूप से सकारात्मक प्रभाव पड़ा है। पिछले 9 वर्षों में लोगों की आय में लगभग 3 गुना वृद्धि हुई है। भारत के आर्थिक विकास में महिलाओं की सशक्त भागीदारी रही है। आईटी से लेकर स्पेस तक, बैंकिंग से लेकर हेल्थ केयर तक महिलाएं पुरुषों के साथ कंधे से कंधा मिलाकर देश की प्रगति में योगदान दे रही है। भारत के लोगों ने 2047 तक एक विकसित राष्ट्र बनाने का संकल्प लिया है। फ्रेंड्स, मैं आप सभी को भारत की विकास यात्रा में शामिल होने के लिए आमंत्रित करता हूं। कोविड महामारी ने हमें रेजिलिएंट और इंक्लूसिव सप्लाई चेन्स के महत्व को सिखाया है। इसके लिए आपसी विश्वास और पारदर्शिता बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है। हम एक दूसरे की ताकतों को जोड़कर पूरे विश्व, खासतौर पर ग्लोबल साउथ के कल्याण में महत्वपूर्ण योगदान दे सकते हैं। एक्सेलेंसी, मैं एक बार फिर ब्रिक्स बिजनेस जगत के लीडर्स को उनके योगदान के लिए बधाई देता हूं। इस मीटिंग के शानदार आयोजन के लिए मैं मेरे मित्र राष्ट्रपति रामाफोसा का भी आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
I'd like to. You were listening to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's address to a business forum in Johannesburg. Now take a look at some other stories making news around the world. Syrians protest against worsening economic conditions and the latest fuel price hikes in the city of Sweda. Hundreds of people chanted and waved flags at Al-Sayr Square. Syria is in deep economic crisis. Its currency has plunged to a record 15,500 Syrian pounds to the US dollar. At least 8 people, including 7 children, are trapped in a cable car nearly 900 feet above a ravine in Pakistan after a line snapped. 2 army helicopters carried out a rescue operation. The African Union has suspended Niger from all its activities following the military coup. Last month's coup sparked alarm among Western allies and democratic African states, fearing that it could allow Islamist groups to expand their reach. The Economic Community of West African States, also known as ECOWAS, has been trying to negotiate with the junta, but it is ready to send troops into Niger to restore constitutional order if diplomatic efforts fail. In the ongoing violence, Russia has once again accused Ukraine of drone attacks on Tuesday. Russian officials claim to have brought down 2 Ukrainian drones near Moscow and 2 drones over the Bryansk region that borders Ukraine. No casualties were reported, but the airspace above Moscow was briefly closed and operations in 3 major airports suspended. The Russian military claimed that the debris from the drones caused damage to a high-rise residential building and smashed windscreens of cars parked below. Dasha Chernyshova reports from Moscow.
Russia says it repelled yet another Ukrainian drone attack against the Russian capital. According to the city mayor Sergei Sobyanin, 2 drones were shot down near Moscow in the area of Chastsy and Krasnogorsk in Moscow region. As a result, one of the residential multi-story buildings in Krasnogorsk had the windows on several floors knocked out, and the cars parked near the house were also damaged. Airspace over the region was briefly closed during this drone raid, halting air traffic at the capital's international airports. Another drone attack was repelled in the Bryansk region, according to Russia's Ministry of Defense. 2 drones were detected by the Russian air defenses and jammed by electronic warfare. The ministry also said that on Tuesday its forces had destroyed a US-made military speedboat near the Snake Island in the Black Sea. Early in the day, it was reported that a reconnaissance boat was discovered near Russian gas production facilities in the Black Sea. It was neutralized by the crew of Su-30 SM fighter jet. Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow, reporting for DD India.
Property mogul Shretha Thavisin has been elected as Prime Minister of Thailand. It ends almost 3 months of political deadlock. Thavisin won the support of nearly 2/3 of the country's lawmakers. It paves the way for the formation of a new coalition government. Thavisin's election awaits royal approval. The coalition government is likely to have around a dozen parties, including those created by the royalist military, which overthrew governments in 2006 and 2014. The populist heavyweight Thutai propped up Thavisin just a few months ago. In sports news, a penalty from captain Martin Odegaard gave 10-man Arsenal a battling Premier League victory at Crystal Palace. Mikel Arteta's side looked uncomfortable to beat Crystal Palace 1-0. Arsenal now join Brighton and Manchester City on 6 points from 2 games, while Palace failed to build on their opening day win at Sheffield United. Global mountain biking talents converged at the Swatch 9's 2023 mountain bike event at Green Hill Bike Park in Germany. Riders showcased their skills on the course. This unique event has once again created the space to elevate the sport to new heights, unfolding new tricks during a week-long session. The global event saw a raft of new tricks performed, including the world's first front flip cliffhanger from Spanish veteran Bienvenido Aguado and the first Superman seat grab Indian air on a downhill bike performed by Australia's Caroline Buchanan. That's all for this edition of DD India News Hour, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. From all of us here in New Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.